Hey guys, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. Got a really good Figured Out Baseball podcast today in the series that we call the Real Dirt Podcast, where we get our hands dirty in one particular topic. Typically in our longer free podcasts on the website, we jump around from topic to topic. In the Real Dirt series, we spend the entire podcast talking about one specific subject. So if it's a subject you're interested in, a subject matter you're curious about, hopefully we'll cover everything that you need to know within that topic. Today, we are being joined by Jon Shehan, who's the head coach at Millersville University, an extremely successful Division II program in Pennsylvania. We're going to be talking today about timing in recruiting. And if you follow the Figured Out Baseball Twitter account, you might have seen that Coach Miller and I had a little bit of a discussion on social media, and then I put out a couple videos actually talking about the timing of recruiting, and I think it was a little bit different than what Coach Shehan was talking about. But that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the timing in recruiting, and we'll explain exactly what that means in a minute. Before we jump into the podcast itself, I want to give Coach Shehan give you the background on Coach Shehan so you know where he's been and just kind of have an idea of his background and how successful he's been. He's a graduate of Millersville University, where he's now the head coach. He graduated from there in 2006 after a very successful playing career. As the head coach at Millersville, he has won 8 Eastern Division Conference championships. He's made 9 NCAA tournament appearances. Twice his team has won the NCAA Regional and advanced beyond that to the Super Regional. In 2016, his team was the NCAA Division II national runner-up. They finished with an overall record that year of 53-7, an unbelievable mark there. 4 times in his coaching career, his head coaching career, his team has won 40 games. He is also a 3-time ABCA Atlantic Region Coach of the Year award recipient. Coach Shehan, I really appreciate you joining us on the podcast today.
Jeff, I'm glad to be here, and a subject that is dear to my heart, especially this time of the year, recruiting and timing.
So let's talk about specifically what timing in recruiting means, because I'm sure a lot of people listening to this may not be exactly sure what it means to talk about timing in recruiting. So going back to that tweet that you wrote, and it was a really good thread. If anybody wants to go back and look at that, whether they'll be able to find it or not on Twitter, sometimes things that are a little bit older are hard to find. But can you talk a little bit about what you mean specifically by the timing in recruiting and what you wrote about that day on Twitter?
Sure. Every year is a little bit different in terms of what a program's needs are. How many shortstops do they need? Do they need a shortstop? How many catchers? Everybody needs arms every year, but some years we need 3 arms, and some years like this year we needed 8 arms. So it just depends on, it starts with need. Now, what positions do you need to fill in each class in terms of what you're losing or what you might think you might need to lose from a draft aspect? It's become trickier, obviously, with COVID. But then the timing part of it is each program is going to be a little bit different in terms of when kids tend to commit. We've fallen into a pattern specifically at Millersville that it seems to be when the travel ball period starts wrapping up from the summer. So last week of July, first week of August, we generally start to fill up pretty quick. And there's only so many spaces, and in the PSAC especially, and I can speak to that, being in that conference, there's not a lot of scholarship dollars. So, we don't deadline guys, but, spots come and go, and when there's no spots left, there's no spots left. So timing is crucial, and many times we've had guys say, hey, I want to come here, and 24 hours before we had a spot, 24 hours later we don't. So it's it tends to really get competitive, and things move really, really fast. So that's kind of the timing in a nutshell for us. But like I said, every program is going to be different in terms of, how the admissions process works too. That could play into it.
If a player asks you specifically, or maybe he doesn't even need to ask you, do you discuss timing with players? Do you tell players basically what your timeline looks like, or how many spots you have left? Or again, you said you don't give them a deadline, but without giving a deadline, do you tell players that up front? Or if not, if a player asked you, coach, what's the timeline here? Like, how long do I have to make a decision? Are you willing to, is it okay for a player to ask you that? And I'm asking this specifically if if a prospective student athlete is listening to this who is uncommitted and maybe is in some discussion with schools, just want to kind of, if that's a question on their mind, I'd like you to be able to address that.
Yeah, for sure. So it's one of the last questions we typically ask on every recruiting visit, and it starts with, what's your timeline look like? Because every recruit's going to have, a calendar built out for the year, and hey, we've got events through the end of July, or we've got 3 events in the month of August that we've already paid for. And it's helpful for us to know based on, does their timeline match ours? And if the timeline for a guy is to make a decision in October, and based on what's available in terms of we like 10 pitchers and we have 5 spots, when I say we don't deadline guys, we may offer 6 or 7 pitchers X amount of dollars and say we've got 4 or 5 spots, and once those spots fill up, they fill up. What you get is you get the 4 or 5 guys that want to be in your program. But that guy that had a timeline of October, sorry man, it's probably not going to happen for you at Millersville, and that's the timing piece that if you want to play for us, it's unfortunately we're especially this year and this time, it's a buyer's market, right? There's more pitchers out there than roster spots available in college baseball, or at least at this level. So I think discussing it, creating clarity around it is huge. We have to have that conversation, because if this is really where you want to be, the pressure part might not be us deadlining you. The pressure part may be, hey, if this is really where you're going to be, then you need to make a decision to come here that might be outside of your comfort zone, or maybe even outside of your timeline, unfortunately. So the buyer's market part is the hardest thing to get through to a lot of families and recruits, because there are just more players available that can help good programs, especially at the Division II level. Right now, I would guess at the Division III level as well. There's more players available than there are roster spots. So
that's absolutely the case. I've seen that even just from the scouting that I do. I've been in contact with coaches over the last year or so and said, hey, I think this guy can play for you, and a lot. And I've gotten some responses in a normal year, yes, but honestly, this year, there's so many extra pitchers out there, so many other guys available, that a guy that would normally go to a certain level is now either being offered less scholarship money than he would have been 2 years ago, or even dropping down a level just because of the extra bodies that are available, because COVID has allowed guys to play for a 5th and a 6th year. And, it's crazy what's happened to rosters. Coach Shehan, how do you interpret if a player says to you, okay, you maybe you have the kid on a visit, he's been on your campus, he's met you, he's met the other assistant coaches, you've made him a scholarship offer, and he says, I'm going to hold out just so I can finish I'm going to play fall ball. I have a couple more months left of baseball. I'm going to just play it out and see what other offers come along. What is that? How do you interpret that as a coach? And again, asking this from the perspective of a student athlete who might have done that or might have thoughts of doing that. What does that mean when a player says that to you? How's that interpreted from a recruiting standpoint?
I do think that there's a level of there's just a level of honesty there that you got to take in as a coach. The kid's probably misinformed in terms of what's actually available from a roster aspect, at least in our program. Or on the other side of it, maybe we're just a backup plan, and that's just not what they're looking for out of the gate. And to me, I think our culture is the biggest piece of our, if you want to know why our program's successful, our culture is the biggest piece there. And I think our culture should sell. To be honest, I don't want to make it a sales process, because it's really not. I mean, it's about finding the people that fit our program. So to me, it may take a couple weeks, but guys should be able to compare cultures of programs after they go on a few visits and say, that's the place I fit best in. So if you're going to tell me that you're going to wait 2 or 3 months, you're going to wait till the fall, this probably isn't the right place for you anyway. We hope that it kind of slaps you in the face after your visit and you say, whoa, that's for me, or, whoa, that's not for me. And, it is kind of a turnoff, to be honest, when somebody's like, well, we're going to wait for, into the fall. Now, if it's early June and we tell you that we're probably, we typically finish up recruiting in, late July, early August, and you're saying, we're going to wait till the end of the summer season. That's a typical response, and that's totally fine because guys have spent a lot of money to play summer ball, and they tend to have busy weekends, and it's hard to fit visits in. So go on your visits. That's not what I'm saying. But waiting 2 to 3 to 4 more months, and I'm going to go and add 3 or 4 more events is a pretty big turnoff.
Now, you said earlier again that you don't deadline players, but I want people, part of the reason for this podcast is I want to help parents and players understand just what goes on from the recruiting side of things and how recruiters think and interpret things and just how the world is moving from that side of the table. So let's talk about, I want to talk a little bit about just the fact that you don't deadline people. And from my experience as a coach and now, outside of college coaching, I kind of hear a lot more from a lot more programs. I don't know that there's a lot of deadlining going on besides, I've heard legit stories about Power 5 schools giving kids 48 hours to make a decision. And I think that, I don't know, I assume that still happens. And I know there are some other Division I programs that I've heard in the past, even at the mid-major level, that would say, hey, you visited, so once you visit, you have 2 weeks to make a decision or we're moving on. And I've asked guys, what's the point there, or what's the thought process? And it's like, well, if he really likes it and wants to be a part of the program, he'll know it. And if within 2 weeks he doesn't know it, then it's time for us to move on. But I want to ask you, when you have a player that kind of knows everything he needs to know about you and you feel like you've given the player and family enough time to really think about things, and maybe the player says that he is going to wait a little while before making a decision. Tell me why or how it works from your side. You mentioned earlier you might have three scholarships available for pitchers, and you might offer that out to 6 people. Can you kind of explain why that's a necessary thing on the college side of things? And this all plays into the timing, of course, because if a player waits too long, those scholarships might be gone if he decides a couple months from now that, I think I do want to go there. Can you tell me why that happens like it does from your side of things, from the college coaching side of things, why it has to be that way, and why you can't say to a player, hey, you need a couple more months to decide? Great. This scholarship offer is yours. Take as much time as you need. Why could that not happen at the college level? Can you just kind of talk about that and about, how the recruiting process works from your side to help parents and prospective student athletes understand?
Absolutely. So I'm going to peel the onion back from a couple different places. So I think let's start with just the guys we have in our program right now. Player development is where I think we earn the most bang for our buck. So I think our focus on the guys that we have in our program has to be our number one priority. And if we're constantly, recruiting is a 365-day-a-year thing, right? I mean, we're always looking, we're always watching social media, we're always talking to kids, but there's a 2.5-month time period in the summer for our program that we are really focused on, evaluating the right kids for our program, getting to know the kids that we'd like to have in our program, and then making offers and hopefully securing players for the next 4 or 5 years, right? So if we can be laser focused on those 2.5 months, then when our guys get back to school in the fall, we can be laser focused on them and not have to worry about going out and seeing this junior college showcase and this showcase and this event and continuing to bring kids on campus, because it's super time consuming to be focused on recruiting at that point. So, and I know at Division I, man, it never ends. But we've kind of found a niche here that we can focus solely on player development for most of the year and make our guys better here. So that's part number one, to focus on our own guys. Part number two is that we've found a way to really kind of get to know the guys that we're recruiting and be laser focused on trying to shrink that pool from maybe 60 guys down to the 15 that we really think can contribute from a talent aspect first, and then from a cultural aspect. And trying to eliminate guys from a cultural aspect has really helped us fine tune. Okay, instead of doing 35, 40, 50 visits to get 10 guys, we're going to do 15 to 20, and we're going to offer those 15 to 20, and we're going to tell those guys we're offering 15 to 20 and be really clear. And then the first 10 guys that take it. And it is a little bit of a juggling, deal, because there's going to be some guys that get offered a little bit more than others, obviously. So at the end, it really comes down to communicating, hey, we got this much money left. We need 3 more guys. Okay, we just had another guy commit. We've got this much money left, and we've got 2 guys left. And it does put a little bit of pressure on recruits to pull the trigger, so to speak. But we really want the guys that are best for our program, and that's usually the guys that, just like you said earlier, they know what they're looking at, they know what they want, and this is what they want. And that's why we only had 1 guy in the transfer portal in a year where there's 3,400s, because we nailed it on the recruiting end, and we get guys that fit. And I think that's the secret sauce, right? It's getting guys that fit your culture, and then they tend to not leave because they know what they're getting into, and they know exactly what they signed up for. When they sign up for it, they're getting it, rather than, hey, I'm signing up for something I didn't expect, right? The expectations in reality always have to meet if you're going to have sustainability and not have 15 guys in the transfer portal every year. So, and by the way, the guys in the transfer portal, let's just say academically it didn't really work out. So, we're still, we're looking for guys that are getting it done from that aspect as well too. But there's usually a reason why guys are in the transfer portal from our program, and I'm proud of that. We want guys that stick and make a lifetime decision here. So, did that answer the question? Because there's a lot of layers to that onion. That that's why we offer 10 guys and get 6, or that's why we offer 15 guys and get 10.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to ask you, because I think it's a fair question, because I think a lot of parents and kids out there might feel like, a coach saying that to them, like, hey, we need one, we want to sign 1 more shortstop on scholarship. We've offered 3 guys. The first guy to take it gets it. Like, a lot of people are going to look at that and think, well, that you're putting pressure on me, and like, I need some more time to think about it. But I wanted to give it from a coach's perspective as to why that's fair, but also why you kind of need to do it, because and why you can't just kind of give a guy as much time as he needs to make a decision if maybe your top guy is going to drag his feet a little bit. I just kind of wanted to give a coach's perspective on that.
Absolutely. So the other side of that too is that, another layer of that onion. If you look at it from a Division I aspect, and they can offer a shortstop 70%, right? I think if you offer guys that much money, you have every right to say, hey, you got 2 weeks, because we want to offer that money to 2 other guys. We might offer 35% to 2 other guys if you decide you're the guy we really want, but we can't just wait around with 70% when we have 11.7 scholarships, right? So at our level, we have 3 scholarships for the entire team. Some of us at our level only have 2 scholarships for the entire team. So if we offer $1,000 to somebody, I don't feel like I have the right or the power to say, you got 48 hours or you got 2 weeks to make a decision. But what I will tell you is, for $1,000, we're offering 3 shortstops $1,000, or we're offering 3 shortstops $2,000 or $3,000, and at that point, we're just gonna give you the time. Like, you can go on other visits, sure, but the bottom line is, when the money's gone, the money's gone. When the spot's gone, the spot's gone. So, try to be efficient with your other visits and be efficient with your decision making. There are times where high school kids and parents think they have all the time in the world, and they'll just sit and wait and not make a decision for any other reason other than they don't have to make a decision. So I think sometimes pressure is good in terms of, hey, let's go make our visits. Let's sit down and do our pros and cons. We already know Coach Shehan. We already know Coach whoever. let's figure out what the right fit is and pull the trigger and make this decision. And that's really what it comes down to. We there's pressure on both ends. We want recruiting to be over as soon as we possibly can. Like I said, so we can focus on our team. But the player has to feel better when they get it done too, right? The parents have to feel the pressure lifted off of their shoulders.
Yes, and they can stop going to events that cost $700 for one day type of events when there are going to be two coaches in the stands and all the other stuff that recruits go through nowadays. And it's not any different than, in my opinion, it's not any different than what you're going to experience elsewhere in your life. I think baseball and life have a lot of similarities in a lot of other ways. Like you meet, if you're an older, you're out of college and whatever, you meet a couple girls and you like them both. Like you can't just juggle both for a while. You've got to make a decision. If you have a couple jobs, if you're applying for other jobs and you're ready to move on from somewhere and you get two job offers, you can't take 3 months to make a decision because they're going to move on. They need somebody now. And from a college's point of view, there's a lot of reasons why, why you might tell somebody that there is a timeline of sorts, even if it's not a quote unquote a deadline. But I think you're right that sometimes putting a little pressure on, makes people look at what they really want. And ultimately, if the school you want is still not in front of you, then you say, sorry, coach, I need to wait for something else. And that's fine. But like that decision, a no is almost as valuable to a college recruiter as a yes is, because then at least you need to go another direction. You're not just kind of in limbo for a long time.
I think one of the things that really helps timing is having recruits that really know what they want before they get into the process. There's something that I would recommend every kid do. Yeah, you hear, hey, go watch games, right? Well, you can go watch games and have a pretty good idea that you fit in from a talent aspect anywhere in the PSAC, for example, or any mid-major. Or, hey, if you're a Power 5 guy, you're probably going to know it pretty early in your career just by the amount of interest. And, Greg Williams comes out for PBR. It's like, hey, if you're a Power 5 guy, you probably are. Because that's what his job is, to go out and evaluate players and know what it looks like. So that's one side of it, certainly. But, the academic side has to come first and foremost. It gets overlooked, right? If they don't have your major, don't go there. That's going to make it easier from a timing aspect. You don't have to visit schools that don't have, geology if you want to be a geology major. So that's part of it. And then, from a baseball aspect, you ought to kind of have an idea what you want to get into from a cultural side of things. I think, there are certain programs that there's guys in our league that I love and respect. And I love to compete against them, but I know our cultures are completely different. And it's not a good and bad thing. It's just we're different coaches. We have different styles. We go about practice different. We go about player development different. We build our teams based on offense or based on pitching or, some guys play a lot of small ball. Some guys hit home runs and strike out a lot. Like, do you fit from that aspect, and what are you looking for? What do you want from a development aspect? We get the question all the time, do you do driveline? What is doing driveline, right? Like, here's what we do from a pitching development aspect, and do you fit this side of development or not? I think there's a lot of those questions that can speed up the process. I'm a hunter, okay? So if I go out west and I have a week to hunt and I decide to pass up a big elk on the first day, thinking that there's something better on the last day, it's a chance, right? And I think that's the timing that you got to think about. Only the pressure is greater if the shoe fits, right? If you feel like this is the right place for you, then you need to pull the trigger and not wait around too. I'm thinking that there's something better out there, because there likely isn't, especially in this day and age. Don't wait around. I think it happens every single year where we lose a guy, or a guy loses a situation that he thinks that he's in love with, because there might be that prettier girl that's around the corner. In reality, the other girls have already looked at you and said, no thanks, or we're already full, we're already married. We already got a boyfriend. So,
and that's what a lot of the timing in this conversation comes down to, that when you find something that you feel good about, sometimes you just got to say yes and go for that and trust your gut, as opposed to maybe listening to a little voice in your ear, or if you have an advisor who's saying, I think you might be able to find something a little better. I mean, you might, but there's a pretty good chance you might not. You might really regret that decision down the line because, like you said, just spots fill up. Spots fill up everywhere pretty quickly. I've got 2 more questions for you, Coach Shehan, and we've got about 5 minutes left in our segment here. The first one, and maybe this will take up the whole 5 minutes, and if it does, that's okay. You see a kid that you like, and it's kind of the timing of, I guess, recruiting-wise, it makes sense to start getting him on campus to talk to him. Like if you see a freshman in high school that you like, that's probably not the right timing for you guys. But if you see a guy that, like, the timing of recruiting kind of works out, you see him, you speak to him, you get him on campus, and you make him an offer. Can you give me a rough idea of, like, again, just kind of, you give a kid and his family time to learn everything they need to learn about you. Could you give me a timeline of, like, how quickly you would like to see things happen? Actually, let me go back one step. You see a kid and like him, and you call him and say, "I'd like to have you on a visit." What is the typical timeline from the time he visits to the time that kid gets an offer to when you would comfortably like to hear a yes or a no? And again, I'm asking this to give anybody that's listening to this a rough idea, maybe before they even get into the process of, like, we're going to have to make a decision in this period of time, so they sort of know how quickly they've got to move. What's the timeline there from, again, you see a guy, you call him, we want to have you on campus. From that day until either a yes or a no, what's the timing you'd like to see?
Yeah, so about 10, I bet less than 10% of our kids commit before Christmas of their junior year. We had one kid commit around Thanksgiving last year, and it's rare. I mean, we're going to bring in maybe a half dozen kids in the fall that we really, really like, that we feel like we have to compete with Division I schools, and they're probably going to get deadlined, or they're probably going to have to be making decisions to go to Division I or not before then. The majority, 90% of our recruiting classes, we love to see kids in high school because the competitive aspect, right? They're going out to win that day. They're not necessarily going out to play for PBR or to go in a showcase and run really well, or, focus individually. They're focused on winning games for their team. So that's what we're all about. We want to win games first, and then we want to help kids get drafted. And obviously the big piece is come get an education, number one. But from a baseball aspect, win games, play professionally, have a great experience. So that's what we're after. We're after competitors, and what better way to do it than see them in high school? But we're not expecting kids to, stop what they're doing, come visit. Visits typically don't happen during the high school season. Visits typically happen when they're out of school during the summer. So we're trying to lock in and get as many visits as we can done in June and July and make those offers, knowing that most of these kids are going to make decisions when their summer season ends and all of their events are wrapping up. And that generally is what happens. 2 months is not a long time in terms of, hey, we're going to hear from you, and we have a pretty good idea that we're going to hear from you the last 2 weeks of July. And we try to get that from guys. Like, what is your time period for making a decision? Okay, that pretty much works for us. That's good. Let's just keep in touch. We're going to see it 2 or 3 more times between now and then. But like I said, if you're waiting till school starts again, there probably won't be any space for you. So that's reasonable for us. I wouldn't say it's like we're going to give you a month or we expect you to make a decision in a month. It's kind of more timing in terms of the rest of the class. Like most of these kids at our level, for whatever reason, have been making decisions those last 2 weeks of July, the first week of August. And it's been going for 4 or 5 years now that our classes have generally wrapped up. And we might need to, get back in the fall and see that had a couple, we had an injury, or we had, some guys that aren't getting it done in the classroom, and we have to add a guy. But for the most part, it's been 1 or 2 guys, and we usually do that by way of transfer. So
that's kind of leads me to my last question in the last minute that we've got here. Is there a time when it can get too late for guys if kids hold out for whatever reason because they want to wait for a Division I offer, or they want to wait for something better? Do you ever have needs pop up late? Like, just for example, when a guy tells you kind of late that he's not coming back, that you weren't expecting, or someone, is ineligible. Does that sort of stuff happen where, like in the last month or 2 or even 3 months, just say after you've played high school ball senior year and you're in the summer and you're still not committed, but but either maybe a kid took a jump or for whatever reason he's still out there. Do you ever have spots that pop open late for a kid like that?
It's super rare, but yes. We added a left-handed pitcher this year, and you're talking about left-handed pitching. Like, who doesn't need left-handed pitching? But we picked up another high school guy this year, and he was lights out. He took a major jump, but it was like a no money, hey, we're going to take this guy over a transfer. And usually we'll pick, if you look at our roster, we don't build. There's a lot of D2 clubs. Like, we faced one in the World Series a couple years ago. The only high school kid that they signed on the entire roster ended up being a big leaguer. Every other guy on their 25-man NCAA roster was a transfer. That's not our program. We build on high school kids primarily, and we cherry pick one or two transfers every year. But this kid this year late was one of those guys that we felt like it was a better investment of a roster spot for us to sign a high school kid with 4 years of eligibility rather than go out and get a transfer with 1 or 2 years left. And we just felt like it would be a better situation. We do feel like he could be an impact guy early based on his stuff. So it happens, but it's rare. It's very rare. We've had 3 walk-ons make our team in 15 years, and 2 of them were All-Americans. And both of them had our hits record at one time. So it's tough to find roster space late in the game, for sure.
That's really great stuff.
Don't wait around.
This is Jon Shehan, everybody. He's the head coach at Millersville University, a very successful Division II program in Southeast Pennsylvania. Coach Shehan, I just want to thank you for taking the time today to talk about the timing and recruiting. Very much appreciate it, and just appreciate all the info you gave us.
You got it, Jeff. I got a heart for these families. I know they're going through a pressure-packed time, and I'm more than happy to share as much information